Okay, so let's continue our adventure here. So you can see it's nice here when we're kind of out in the open and the sun is behind us, and you know, we get a nice view of the grade here. So maybe we should start with our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway Company between 1905 and 1908. It was going to be part of an attempt by the Grand Trunk Company, which was one of the oldest railway companies in Canada. They got their start back in 1852 to build another transcontinental railway across Canada. Basically, the Grand Trunk Company wasn't really overly keen on building, you know, a line all the way across Canada. And so after a lot of years of back and forth, they finally formed a partnership with the Canadian government to build this second transcontinental railway. So essentially the plan was that the Canadian government was going to build the eastern half of this line, basically everything from Winnipeg to New Brunswick under the name National Transcontinental. And, excuse me, Grand Trunk was going to build everything from Winnipeg to the west to Prince Rupert under the name Grand Trunk Pacific. Now this line was a bit of an anomaly because it was a Grand Trunk line, but it connected to the NTR. So basically the purpose of this line was to give that system access to Lake Superior. Obviously there was a lot of, you know, there was a lot of cargo to haul to Lake Superior, primarily things like grain. And so they wanted that access. And so again, this line was built between 1905 and 1908. Basically ran from the then city of Fort William, which is now part of Thunder Bay, all the way up to a place called Superior Junction, which is just east of the modern community of Sioux Lookout, which at the time was called Graham. And there it linked up to the NTR. Now, unfortunately, not long after the whole system was built, there were some issues that popped up regarding the Grand Trunk operation of the NTR system. And so that whole plan fell through. And so now the Canadian government had to step in and basically run this line, which they had built. Now, before we go any further, good thing I noticed the marker here. So what we have is kind of something really unusual. We have a couple of chunks of concrete that are here. And if, this one's all chipped on the top. What I have a feeling that these are, and I've seen a couple of these before, and there's a couple on the previous section by where Dog River Junction is. These, when you see them, they look a little bit bigger, but I don't know. There's usually like a metal cap on the top. There's a metal piece on the top, and as far as I know, these were used to hold rails. They would put lengths of rail on them every so often, so they would have rail nearby. Luna, they would have pieces of rail that they could use when sections broke or needed to be replaced, and they would have rail on hand. So that's kind of neat to see that. I saw that coming this way. Again, if you would have come this way, you probably wouldn't have seen it. All right, so anyway, we were talking about issues operating the NTR. So the Canadian government had to step in and basically take it over. So to do that, they created a new entity called the Canadian Government Railways, which included the NTR system and a bunch of other kind of bankrupt lines. And so what happened was, as again, this was a Grand Trunk line, but again, it connected to the NTR. So the Canadian government turned around and leased this line from Grand Trunk Pacific. And so its name changed. So originally it had been the Lake Superior Division, or the Lake Superior branch of the Grand Trunk Pacific, and it became the it was split into two subdivisions. It became the Fort William and Raith subdivisions of Canadian Government Railways, and that happened in July of 1915. And so it operated as part of the Canadian Government Railways network up until the end of 1918. And it was during the Canadian Government Railway times that there was a whole bunch of big upgrades done to this line, including the culvert that we saw, again, that you saw the 1917 date stamp on. And so in 1919, this became part of the newly created Canadian National Railways, following sort of the merger amalgamation of the Canadian Government Railways and Canadian Northern. And so again, the name of this line changed once again. It became the Fort William and Raith subdivisions of Canadian National Railways. I usually have these little cards. I think I've got it memorized by now. There's been so many name changes. But later in 1919, the name changed again. It became the Lake Superior subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it stayed like that until 1923. Now, one of the big issues that Canadian National had when it took over had all of these sort of redundant lines, all of these duplicated lines, and this was one of them. So for the first 20 something miles outside of what used to be Fort William, again now is Thunder Bay, you basically had two railway lines kind of running the same route. You had the old Canadian Northern and you had this line. So what they decided to do was they decided to double the old Canadian Northern route, which is now the CN-Kashabawi subdivision, which still is. And then this line, they would build a bridge a few miles back at a place called Conmee Junction, and the both traffic would use the Canadian Northern route, the old Canadian Northern route, the Kashabawi subdivision, to Conmee Junction, and then the traffic for this line would cross over the river on a new bridge over the Matawan River, and then head up on its original route. So in 1923, the name of this line changed. It became the Graham subdivision. And then in 1924, the name changed again. It became known as the Crest and Graham subdivisions. And that was done in preparation for the abandonment of the Crest subdivision, right? So basically everything just to the east of us, so at Dog River Junction, everything from there back towards Fort William was going to be abandoned. So in 1925, the line was actually split into three: the Crest, the Raith, and the Corn subdivisions. And then in the spring of 1925, the Crest subdivision was abandoned. And so the line continued to operate as the Raith and Corn subdivisions up until 1931, when the name reverted back to the Graham subdivision, which most people know it as. And it continued to operate as the Graham subdivision until 1994, when CN decided to abandon the line. Okay, I know that's a long, sort of convoluted story. All right, so we're plugging our way here to the west. The line goes through a bunch of curves here. We're in kind of a bit of a river valley here, alongside, again, the Matawan River. There's the Sunshine Creek, which we're passing little tributaries that sort of flow into it. Again, hopefully you can see this okay on the camera. I hate when you get this light and dark. You get lots of contrast and it's hard to see anything. But again, beggars can't be choosers here. Like I said, the weather has just been atrocious lately. So we can't really complain. Like I said, it rained all day yesterday. You can see that the ground is still wet. So again, we're kind of in this floodplain, so you can see there's lots of sandy soils, lots of jack pines, and looks like some spruce and things like that growing up alongside the grade. The grade isn't too bad here. There's obviously you can see there's some growth, but what's happened is sort of recreational traffic has helped kind of keep the vegetation down. So because again, it's been 30 years. It'll be 30 years at the end of the month, the 31st of May, that this line was officially declared abandoned, and they pulled up the rails not long after that. My first experience on this line was back in '96, a couple years after they abandoned it. And I've sort of seen bits and pieces over the years. We did a few explorations back in 2020, kind of at the start of COVID, but then I kind of decided to focus my attention on another line, the Kinghorn, which I'm still working on. We're going to hopefully be doing that next weekend, but I'm going to try to do some parts of this one, as you're going to see at the end here. This line is starting to deteriorate, unfortunately. Lots of cuttings. There's a few rock cuts. So again, we're kind of west and then north and then west and north again. All right, lots of curves. This line, because again, just by the nature of sort of the route, there's a lot of grade issues, and one of the things with the Grand Trunk Pacific NTR system is there was very strict stipulations on gradient. Everything had to be below 1%. So there's lots of curves and twists and things like that in this line to try to mitigate those curves. And this line climbs very quickly. When we get to Ellis Station, we're basically going to be about 1,200 feet above sea level. And essentially that's 600 feet above the level of Lake Superior, because Lake Superior is at 600 feet. And so Ellis is at what, milepost 30 on the original line, 32.7, 32.8. We have climbed 600 feet in those 30 miles. So I think we have a stop coming up here, I think. Maybe not. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so just up here we have a kind of a neat little feature. Unfortunately, very badly deteriorated. Again, it's been 30 years since this line was in operation. So way down there, probably about 30 feet down there, we have a wooden box culvert, and so we're going to go take a look at it on both sides. It was a bit of an adventure getting down there on the outbound trip. All right, so we're down here below the level of the grade. I don't know how far we are down. I didn't bring the GPS with me. You got to be 30 feet down. So what we have here is we have the remains of a wooden box culvert. I don't think I see a modern culvert in there. I see a whole bunch of timbers. And the water's still flowing through there, but everything around here is in pretty rough shape. If I carefully go this way, there's a huge spot here where it's been eroded. The sun's peeking out here. You can see it's all deteriorated. So everything under here has subsided. Okay, let's jump over to the other side. All right, so we're way down here on the other side. Just up ahead, you can see where the water is flowing out. So this was a very long wooden box culvert. You can see down here pieces of the culvert in here, and then this piece was all covered up, I'm guessing, because it's way the heck down there. Now there's another piece over here where you can see it. The trick is going to be trying to get there. Again, we had that rain last night and everything is wet and slippery. And then it got cold last night too, so there's like everything's icy too. Additionally. So here you can see some of it here. You can see way down in there. So again, this was a pretty long box culvert because the grade is up there. We've got to be 20 or 30 feet from the grade. And so this thing stretched a long, long way. Like, I don't know if I can show you here. So There's the grade up there. And it goes all the way down that way. So just a crazy long wooden box culvert. All right. Let's head our way back up.